Hi,
Good.
Mila.
Hi, Mila. Welcome to class number 104 of Faith and Calm. We're going to get started here. And thank you for all coming. I hope everybody had a wonderful first days of Pesach. It's not over yet. We just took our first step going, and yeah, we're now counting our steps. I'll have to remind Shalom Shudas after Mara. We have to count.
Oh, count.
Yes.
Is
I could.
This is the third night of the Omer.
We don't count it yet. It's not dark enough yet, but yeah, be careful. If you say something like that, then that could be considered counting it. Then you can't say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So there's this weird Jewish custom. People ask, "What night is it tonight?" And they say, "Well, yesterday it was the second night." And you go, "Well, what kind of an answer is that?" You know, but then that's what you classically get.
You can't say, right?
You can't say the day. It's like, what day is today? Well, yesterday was Sunday, you know. I said, well, it's like, thank you very much. Yesterday was Sunday. You tell me what today is.
And if you forgot to count it, what should you do?
So in the morning, you can still count it the next day. But once you have stopped counting the days, then you can't make a blessing anymore. You can still say the day, but you can't say it with a blessing anymore. Because they all need to be counted. They need. That's how we're counting up to Shavuos.
So if you say it in the morning,
you can just count without saying the bracha.
Without the blessing, yes.
So if you say it in the morning for the day before, what would you say?
Like today, you would have said today is the second day of the Omer. But without the blessing. Without the blessing. Yeah.
Okay.
You can still do it. It's not dark yet. So, if you haven't done it yet for the second day, you can still count the second day. But okay, well, we go. I guess it's been busy. I've been busy. I've been worn out, and late nights, and lots of cleaning, and lots of shopping, and lots of fun experiences at all the different stores. But let's try and say something that a little bit more on the spiritual side, the internal side, and find out my topic is going to be about the essence of what is a Jew really. And this is coming from a mimer that the Rebbe said on his birthday. He just passed his 120th birthday. It was last week on, Nisan, which was what, Tuesday?
Yes.
Tuesday was his birthday. And he said this on his 70th birthday, which was the first time he really emphasized the whole idea about Jewish birthdays. It was considered not to be such a Jewish thing to do, to have birthday parties. So the Rebbe, said this thing, and he explained, in effect, what the true definition of what a Jew is, what a Jew really wants to do, what a Jew is, and God's connection to us. Because there is a custom that during the days of Nisan, the first 12 days, you say the Nasi, the prophet of that particular day. And that day was the 11th is the day connected with Asher, and the Asher is referred to as the tribe Asher, and Asher means praise, as it says Asher ha'am shekach lo, Asher ha'am she'Adonai Elokav. Fortunate is the people who chosen Hashem and made God their king. And the Rebbe says there's a medrash on this that explains, the specialness of the Jewish people. And we need to pull that apart. And we're going to do this on different levels. In other words, we're going to say one thing, and then we're going to take it, and we're going to take it to the next level, and then we're going to take it to the next level, we're going to take it to the next level, and finally going to see, wow, we're really quite more interesting than we ever knew about ourselves. So that's the structure of tonight's talk. So the first thing is based on a medrash, and the medrash explains about the Jews compared to the rest of the world. So it says that there was a king, and the king conquered a new country. And when he came to visit this country, he came with his ministers, he came with his dukes, he came with his generals, and it was a big entourage. And the people were very, very impressed by all these high nobles that came, and there was one group of people that said, "Wow, those generals, I choose them. They're so powerful and so impressive." There was another group that said, no, the dukes, those are the ones that are really the higher officers. I'll choose the dukes. Another one said, no, the ministers themselves, they're connected directly to the king. And there was one simple person there, a smart person, and he says, no, I choose the king himself. I want the king. I don't want the ministers, the dukes, the generals. I choose the king himself because the king is permanent. And the other ones come and they go. And that is the medrash that says, that the Jews didn't choose any other force or power. They want God himself. To understand why what this medrash is trying to teach us, you have to understand a little bit of human history. In history, the Rambam explains, how did this idea of idolatry start? So he explains, and he says that in the beginning, everybody knew, Adam knew, he talked directly to God. He knew there was a God, and he told his children, what God was. And besides, God was available in those days. But as time went on, people began to think, it's a big universe. God's busy. What does he have to do with me and my problems and my issues and what happens with me? And I see that there are forces of nature that are servants of God. I understand that who they ultimately report to is the God. But the fact is that the powers of nature are quite powerful, not just the weather, but, health and sickness and the physical world, the plants and the trees, or whatever. And so the stars conduct destiny of people. And so they began to say, not that there's no God, but I'll worship, I'll give dual duty because these are also important. God actually said that they're important. They also influence the nature of the universe, how things go about. And since they are the ministers, they are his servants, it's only respectable to honor God by honoring his ministers, his agents within the physical world. And then after a while, they began to go a little further and saying, it's dual duty, God, but God may have gotten busy taking a vacation, gone off, done somewhere and so forth. And so we've got to make sure that we cover both bases when he's not around. So we have to also worship build statues and so forth to honor the forces of powers of nature, the Nile and whatever gives us sustenance. And then eventually they began to say, there's no need for God at all. He's taken a vacation. I don't feel him in my life, etc. That is the origins, according to the Ramban, the Maimonides, of idolatry. And the Jew says, no, I'm not choosing any of those forces. I'm choosing God. Why? Because for a very fundamental reason. A person comes, a craftsman, and he builds you with a hammer a nice house, and he builds the wood and so forth. Do you thank the person who built the house, the construction guy, or do you thank the hammer that did it? I don't think the hammer was involved in the process. The wood did something also, but you don't. It's inanimate. It's just the tool in the hand of the craftsman who made the universe. So why are you giving these so much attention to tools of God, which don't really don't have any power in themselves? The only reason that my financial advisor in the stock market and that the president or the government or the CDC have any power over my life is because God is giving them the ability to have that. But the instant God says no, they don't have any power in themselves. The biggest investment companies, Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, around for hundreds of years, they disappear in a night. They don't have any power in themselves. They maybe look like they're powerful. They may look like they have importance, but they're basically, if you worship them, meaning giving them control over your life and saying, I got to give them honor, you know what? They disappear. The same thing with universities. The whole idea of a degree is it necessary for your life? Not necessarily. God is the one who ultimately does it. If universities work, yes. If not, it'll be remote learning. It'll be something else next year. It doesn't have to remain anything. All of these forces that people give over so much energy in life for themselves, you're just tools and intermediaries. So a Jew is smart and he says, you know what? I want the king. These things are good, but they're not necessarily, and they're wonderful, and go learn at universities, build up your investment portfolio, whatever you have to do, but realize that ultimately the source of all of this is not them, it's God. It's God. And that is a Jew. He looks for truth. He looks for truth. There's just one problem, the Rebbe says, and now we're taking it to the next level. And he says, if you want to compare all the forces of nature and all the events and things, powers in this world, the police and universities and stock market and everything, and health and taking care of your health and everything else, as inanimate items that are just an axe in the hand of God, that's true if they're completely inanimate. But you know what? Excuse me. They seem to do have some power. Let me give this an analogy. I like this one. There came from. I heard this not from the mimer that I read directly, but I heard it from Rabbi Weil. I was explaining it this week. So he said, imagine you're in a restaurant, and the waiter brings you the food. Now, you know that the food was done in the kitchen. And the kitchen is responsible for what the taste of the food is and so forth. But because the waiter is also involved in the process, and you won't want him to give the food at the proper time, you give him a nice tip. So in a certain way, those people who worship powers of nature or give more importance to other forces other than just the God, and say that there are other forces around, you have to be, you can't be stupid. You have to take care of, your investment portfolio and whatever. They're sort of right, they're not so stupid, So what is the choice of the smart person that he chooses just God? He says, I only want God. You should tip this waiter. He has some control over your life. And there are a lot of things in life that, you just can't ignore them entirely. But the Jew says, no, ultimately, I'm only connected to God not in a rational way, but in a super rational way, because I understand that ultimately this all can change. And ultimately, it is only God that's in charge. Yes, there are things that, in forces in this world that do affect my life. There are health issues, there are mental issues, there are things with my family and other kinds of stuff. They all affect my life and so forth. But ultimately, I choose the king. Ani Nasav Malka, which is the name of the mimer. It means I choose the king. I want to be connected to the king. I give my forces over to the king. Why? So for this, you need a little bit of understanding of the spiritual construction of the universe. God created the universe. He could have theoretically just created it directly, and everything would be pure as what it truly is. However, if he did that, the entire universe would just say, hey, there's no reality here other than God. The pencil is God, the table is God, the chair is God, the video internet is God, everything is God. And of course, there would be just obvious and plain, and we would just be robots. God said, I want a world where I am concealed, and the people choose to serve me, and they do that going beyond the appearance of stuff. We refer to those appearances as, in Hasidic terminology, is klipa, is a shell, because just like in a fruit, there's food and nourishment inside the item, but you have to get through the shell. You got to crack it, and you got to work at it, and you got to prepare the food to take the peas out of the pea pod and so forth, and get to the food. So in this world, there's a lot of work involved, and it appears like these things are, in order to get to the food, the true nourishment of our souls, what we truly need in the money and in the health and in everything else, and in the relationships that we want. You have to crack the shell. You have to look beyond the superficial reality, because the superficial reality wants to hide the godly, the true source. It wants you to choose the cheap option. And that is unfortunately what we see with a lot of people is, and ourselves oftentimes too, is that, sometimes we go and we choose the quick, free, cheap or cheaper thing rather than the thing that takes more work and more application of ourselves. There are people, for example, who desperately want to have a good time and want to be happy. And so therefore they choose drugs or alcohol or other kinds of stuff. The problem is that, again, with the cheap shell elements of the world, not that these aren't fun things, but you know what? After you get some pleasure out of it, you got to get another one, and the next day another, and another. The nature of all quick fixes is that they evaporate because there was no work involved in it and there was no effort applied to it. And God created the world in order that we serve and we put effort and work into things. So everything that really has any substance or permanence is because there is some work involved. Marriage is a classic case of that. There are people who work, have to work and work and work and work at your relationships with your children, with your spouse, with your family. And it's constantly awareness, and it's not easy. But you know what? It feels good at the end of the day or the end of the life because you put a lot of effort into it, so forth. People who sometimes get involved in affairs or other stuff, they're looking for a quick, exciting, romantic fling. The problem is, I heard it from a psychologist. He said, people who do this sort of thing, and then they divorce their first wife and they get the second wife, it usually the percentage of marriages that survive from that second kind of marriage is about 3% because it was exciting and it was romantic, but you really didn't put any of your life or any energy into that and so forth. And that's why it doesn't stick. These kind of things that come to you cheap, free money, free college, free this, free that. It's all very enticing. The world does this a lot. It gives a lot of that kind of stuff. The Jew says, no, I can choose God because I know that that's what the true reality of the universe is. A story that relates to this, I heard, was from a rabbi named Rabbi Shalom Lipsker, who is the rabbi in Bal Harbor, the shul in what? Florida. Right. So he said as follows. He said, there was a very rich man who was a donor to my shul who came to me one time with a problem he had. The problem was that he divorced his wife because he fell in love with another lady and wanted to live together with his new lady. His problem was that he had a teenage son. Teenage son really liked him and wanted to stay together with the father rather than with the mother. They're like an 18-year-old kid. The problem is that he had enough sense, the sense that this woman was destroyed his family, and he didn't like this new lady. And the new lady knew the same thing, didn't, that she wasn't liked. And so she put down an ultimatum. The ultimatum was as follows. She said, either him or me. He can't come into our house. I'll marry you, but you have to find some other living arrangement for the boy. So the father, trying to be nice, he's a rich man. He said, fine, you know what? I'm going to get this kid an apartment, ocean view, just a block away from me, top penthouse view, beautiful apartment he got him, a new keys to a car, a credit card, which had a tremendous amount of money each month. And he called the boy in and said, here's the keys to the car, here's the keys to the house, and I will be with you. I will come quite often. You'll only be a block away. But the new wife says you just can't live in the same house here. And the kid looked at him, and the kid was obviously smart. And he said, no. He threw the keys back at the father. He said, I don't want that at all. I want a father. Meaning, a Jew senses truth. Ultimately, deep down, Jews may be enticed, may find it comfortable. They may like, their comforts, their house, their cars, their facility, their comfortable lifestyle. But ultimately, Jews are truth seekers, and that's what we are at the depth. And we're not happy with that. We just don't know about anything better. And therefore, people get all involved in stocks or other things, whatever it is, And so if we're looking for that to provide them, because they don't know anything better, they think that's the whole thing of life. But really, a Jew, what the Rebbe says, that what a Jew really wants is he wants the truth. And when he hears the truth and it's said from the heart and it's really clear, and it's clear to them, then they're attracted to it. And that's what a Jew really is. That's the amazing thing about a Jew. He will go to the limits, Himalayas, wherever it is, saying, this is not enough. And life is something more than this. There's something bigger going on here, and he looks for it, and so forth. That's what a Jew is. He looks for that essence. Now, to take it to another level, the Alter Rebbe even took it even further, because one of his famous Yiddish statements was, "I don't want you, I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your heavens, I only want you yourself." And he would oftentimes, in the middle of prayers, would just start saying that I only want God. I don't want any rewards for what I'm doing. I only want you, God. What is he saying? So he gives an example, a metaphor. He says there was a king, he had a feast, and at the feast, he had his ministers and his important servants, and they were sitting at the table, and it was beautiful food there. And in addition, there was so much food. There was also, of course, leftovers for the kitchen staff, the helpers and the servants in the kitchen. And even the dogs underneath the table would get also food, because there was just an abundance of food, and they were also well fed. So everybody was very happy at this feast. The question is, did the king make the feast for the dogs? And the answer is no, he didn't make the feast for the dogs. He gives to other things in this world and to other creations, he gives them a certain power and a certain attraction, and we can get distracted by those things, and we can think that this is what a truly is a fulfilling life, and this is what our focus should be. We don't want to be like the dogs, because the dogs, they really only care about themselves. And the servants in the kitchen, they're basically, they're not there at the table, which means that their interest is really not in the stuff that makes the king happy or serving the king. They serve the king, but only because they're afraid that if they don't, they'll get in trouble. So that's why they're not even at the table. The servants at the table refer to the Jews who are religious, who are excited about Judaism and religions and other kinds of stuff they want to know. But ultimately, they're still not really clued in. They just do it because they figure this is a good way to get an olam haba, a share in the world to come, and some reward in the future. And therefore, they're doing it because it's interesting, and it's a interesting idea. The real ones, the ones who really choose God, are the ones that say, "Hey, I don't want any of this. I just want God. I just care about you. I care about your plans." That ultimately is a Jew. So this is what the Rebbe explained in this mimer. He explained these 4 different levels of the Jew, and that ultimately that the Jew is you want to reach another Jew, you have to somehow give him an insight into himself, and so what is this world about, and what is the focus of this world. And I think we can do that a little bit on Pesach, as we can sort of go to a little bit of a higher place, and maybe not permanently, maybe just take the first step. As I said in the previous classes, Passover is a beginning of a process, a beginning of a leap to a higher place. But then ultimately it is, yes, Jews are interested in truth. They don't take compromises. And once they realize, there's something more out there than just what everybody in the news media is telling you is the most interesting thing to do, they will go to it. They'll stop clubbing and looking for that cheap thrill, because they will realize, what? You just have to go the next night, the next night, the next night, the next night. And it's really not what you're looking for. It's exciting, it's fun, but it doesn't last. It doesn't last. So be the smart person, the one who says, I'm not interested in the generals, I'm not interested in the dukes, I'm not interested in the ministers. Those are all parts of God's creation, and they're all very nice. And I'm not going to say that we reject those things, but we understand that ultimately there's a king, and the king is what the King of Kings, and and you can relate to him anywhere in any place that you're at. Wherever you're at, whatever's going on in your life, you can connect to him. And if you can connect to him, then it's absolutely wonderful right now and right here and right where you're at. And with that, I'll let my wife, I realized that was probably a little philosophical, and my wife will now bring it down to a much more practical way, talking about the whole idea of the Mashiach Suda, which we're going to celebrate on the 8th day of Pesach, and how that is connected to, how Pesach is really connected to this ultimate discovery of revelation of ourselves and godliness.
Thank you, Yechezkel Shimon. Yasher Koach.
Thank you. That was very nice. I was enjoying the philosophical ideas.
Good, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so welcome everybody. Does anybody want to say anything first? No?
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, absolutely. Chag Sameach. Good Moed. That's what we say on the intermediary days. Good Moed. It's called.
Can I ask
Good
you?
morning.
Yeah.
You said if we want, I'm just wondering, you had a bunch of guests for the Seder, for the Sedarim.
Mhm.
How many guests did you have?
There were there were 10 of us total, the first Seder, and 7 of us total the second. And such
So
a
nice.
collection of Jewish humanity. It was so interesting. There
So
was
nice.
it was amazing, the different collection of people. Yeah, it's beautiful, Baruch Hashem. So so anyway, okay. So I want to begin with the 4 things that I usually say, which is number 1, we're in a unique time. And we're in a unique time because we are in the time of Pesach. And the time of Pesach is the most ripe time of the whole time, the whole year for redemption. It says that we were redeemed the first time in Pesach, in Nisan this month, and we will ultimately be redeemed in Nisan. So I always have high hopes for this month. And the Rebbe told us that, he told us in 1992 that the process is starting right now. I'm going to close the door 1 second. The second thing is that our souls were handpicked to be at this juncture of human history. Third thing is that we have all the tools we need to navigate and succeed in our lives, succeed in our missions, our individual missions. And the fourth thing is that what we're doing tonight actively promotes the redemption. It speeds up the redemption. The Lubavitch Rebbe said the fastest way to speed the redemption is by learning about it. So I want to say one thing that I really noticed that it's a funky thing that I just realized this year. You know how different, we had the first night, we only had 10 of us all together, but we came from, there were 2 couples, and then there were 2 couples and 6 other people. Altogether, we had 8 different families at our Seder. And the second night we had 5 or 6 different families, I guess. And 5 different families. And for the first time, it struck me that's exactly what happened in Egypt. In Egypt, we had when we sacrificed the Karban Pesach, when we took the lamb, which was the god of the Egyptians, and we shechted it, and we roasted it in public. We roasted it outside of our houses so that the Egyptians would say, "Oh, they're roasting our god," and the Jews had to be super brave to do that. These people had tortured them so much, but God said, do it in public. And Hashem was so proud of the Jewish people that they did it. He was throwing kisses from heaven. And what did they have to do when they ate that lamb? It had to be a whole lamb. And so not so many families are big enough to eat a whole lamb. So they had to join families together. Various families had to join together on one lamb, to eat together one lamb. And that's exactly, at Rosh Hashanah, a lot of families eat it by themselves. Yom Kippur, the feast before, you eat it by yourself, many people. Sukkot, you have guests, but not like Pesach, where it's just a thing. People who know everything about Torah and mitzvahs, and people who know extremely little, except that they're making a Pesach Seder. They all invite bunches of different families at the same Seder, and it's a custom. And one of the ladies at our first Seder, so she comes to my house a couple times a year, and she used to say, "That's my Judaism. I come to Shalom Yosef's house twice a year." She's a delightful person. She happens to be intermarried, and she has a very 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 holy neshama, and so she was describing what happened that morning. We had the Seder Friday night, the first Seder, and Friday morning, how does a secular Jew begin their day? They don't begin by davening. How did they begin? She began with her morning. She had to run out to the gym, 6:30. She had to be there for the morning dance class or morning exercise class. And she said everybody in that class, in the 6:30 class, is like always sound asleep. They're like, okay, I'm gonna do this, but they're all sound asleep. And so the guy next to her, who is also sound asleep, he looks over at her and he says, "Hey, are you Jewish?" And she said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you going anywhere tonight? Are you doing something tonight?" She said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Me too. I'm going somewhere too." And so everybody, every Jewish neshama is excited by the Seder, because something real is happening during this time of year. Some liberation process is actively happening, and every Jew feels it, and every Jew feels they need to be a part of it. I thought that was a very interesting, whatever, it struck me this year. So anyway, yeah. And another person on our Seder table, we had somebody who was a friend, somebody that I invited. She said, "Can I bring a friend?" So she brought her friend. Her friend was a ger, a convert. He was the kid of his family. His father was a preacher, and he himself is a very, very extremely bright guy. And as he put it, the more he learned about his particular religion, the more things didn't make sense. And he learned more and more and more and more and more. And then he felt he has to go to the Hebrew original. This has happened. This story repeats itself so many times. When somebody really gets into, they see inconsistencies in their religion, and they want to go to the sources, and they look up the Jewish sources. He read more and more and more and more. This guy's probably learned more than most from Jews. He became a frum Jew. He's a frum convert. And anyway, so it's like we had such a beautiful, a very nice cross section of humanity. Anyway, so I want to go briefly to the unsung, my favorite unsung heroine of the Exodus story, and that is, of course, everybody knows about her, but few people know that Miriam the prophetess. The Gemara calls her. What is the Gemara's title for Miriam the prophetess? Much more than Miriam the prophetess. The Gemara calls her the Redeemer of Israel. She's the Redeemer of Israel, and everybody knows. She's the one who saved the Jewish people, and everybody knows. At least she was one of them. Everybody knows the story, so I don't really have to repeat it. That her father wanted to stop having to divorce it. He did divorce his wife, and he was the leader because they were throwing Jewish boys in the Nile. And so he said, "This is a terrible world to bring children into. I'm not going to do it anymore. We should all the guys, we should all separate from our wives. We should all divorce them so that we don't have any more children." And she went to him and she said, "With all due respect, Father, what you're doing is more severe than what Paro is doing, because Paro decreed on the boys, but by nobody being married anymore and not having children, you're decreeing on the girls too." And so the father said, "You're right." And he went back with his wife. And because he was the leader of the generation and everybody respected him, they all went back to their wives. And the next generation is totally Miriam's credit. Had Miriam not done what she did, there would be nobody to save from Egypt. And so the Gemara calls her the Redeemer of Israel. So now there was one other point that Miriam told her father. And Miriam said to her father, Miriam knew that there was a prophecy that we were getting out of here. There's a prophecy. Okay, it's a long time. It was 430 years earlier. God told Abraham, that your children, your descendants, are going to be strangers in a land that doesn't belong to them. But don't worry, I'm going to take them out of there, and they're going to leave with a rechush gadol, with something good. They're going to leave with something good. And so the Jews experienced the slavery, and by and large, they completely forgot about Hashem. It was so awful. People forgot about all Torah and mitzvahs. Except for the tribe of Levi, people didn't. People did very, very, they forgot about kosher. They didn't remember what Shabbos was. They forgot everything. Life was so difficult. But Miriam heard about the prophecy and she wouldn't forget about it. And she said, it's true. It was said a long time ago, and it doesn't look at all like that is what is happening. It doesn't look like it at all. But we have to believe in the prophecy. If there's a good prophecy, if it's a prophecy of something good happening to the Jewish people, it will always come true. It's guaranteed. Hashem guarantees it. And everybody got strength from her. And she strengthened all the women. They made tambourines, as we know, in Egypt, because the women were confident in Hashem and his miracles and in the prophecy that was given to Abraham. So that's a long time, 430 years between the prophecy and the fulfillment of the prophecy. But when it was fulfilled, it was unbelievable. And so too, we also have to believe in the prophecy. When the Rebbe told us in Parsha Shoftim, he said, and the Rebbe never used the word I. He never bragged. He always threw the focus on other people. And yet the Rebbe felt that it was time to wake up the Jewish people. Hey, listen, guys. He said, I'm telling you that the redemption is happening. And I'm not saying this. He said this. I'm not saying this as a sage, and I'm not saying this as a judge. This is being said. He didn't use the word I. He said this is being said with prophecy, and you know that when a prophet says something, it's Jewish law. If he's a proven prophet, meaning that he said two things in the past, that he does all the Torah and mitzvahs, and he says two things that have actively come true, then a Jew is forbidden to doubt it. And so we're forbidden to doubt the Rebbe's prophecy. We're forbidden to doubt it. And the Rebbe said, it's happening. The ball is rolling. So anyway, I want
Saying that
to,
he's a prophet?
pardon?
Are you saying that the Rebbe is a prophet because he fulfilled those two things?
The Rebbe's the Rebbe has fulfilled the requirements for prophecy umpteen times over. Yes, the Rebbe is. The Rebbe said before. I've said it many times in the past, but the Rebbe said before. Who opened up Russia? There was a guy. There was Gorbachev, right? Right when Gorbachev took office, every major news service said, it's going to be much worse in Russia. He's an old line communist. He's a hard line communist. Get ready for worse things happening. That same day, Lubavitch Rebbe called his Hasidim in Russia, in Israel, and said, start building housing. The Jews from Russia are coming out. His closest Hasidim couldn't believe it. And they hung up the phone. The Rebbe says to do something, you do it. But they were totally befuddled. And the Rebbe called back to say, I know you don't see this, but it's happening. They built like a tiny amount of houses, like 250 houses. How many came out? Thousands, hundreds. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands. I don't know how many thousands. Tons of Russian Jews came out. Later, when Gorbachev was a statesman, he came to Israel when he was no longer a politician. He was now a speaker. He came to Israel. The person that the Rebbe called, what's his name? Branover, Professor Branover. That person happened to see. He was a professor at a university in the Negev, and Gorbachev came to that university, and the president said, "Hey, somebody from your country is somebody from your native country, Russia, is here. You want to give him a tour of the campus?" And Professor Branover said, "Yes, absolutely." And while he was giving him the tour, Branover said, "Does Mr. Gorbachev mind if I tell him a story about himself?" And Gorbachev said, "No, no problem." I heard the story directly from Professor Branover's lips. I was there. I heard it not on the telephone, right in person. And anyway, he told Gorbachev, the day you took office, I got a call from the Lubavitch Rebbe saying that I had to build housing for Russian Jews because they're leaving. They're coming out of Russia. And Gorbachev said, I would like to meet such a man who knew more about what I would do than I myself knew. I had no clue that I would ever do such a thing. And that's not only, in the Yom Kippur War, the whole world, all of Israel hung on the Rebbe because the Rebbe said it's going to be good. No, maybe it was a 6-day war. Probably was a 6-day war. It's going to be good. And anti-religious newspapers, because everybody was so frightened, anti-religious newspapers were publishing big headlines. Lubavitcher Rebbe says it's going to be okay. And besides that, there's thousands of personal prophecies, thousands of them, and many more public prophecies, many, many, many more. You have to keep all the Torah and mitzvahs, and you have to know the Torah like a book. And even and many people have attested to they never saw anybody who knew Torah better than the Rebbe. So anyway, that's not the topic for now. So anyway, so I'm just going to tell you a few stories about what happened on Erev Pesach in Crown Heights. Not this year, many years ago, the Rebbe used to give out matzahs to people who came, and somehow these matzahs carried blessings. This is Erev Pesach. Can you imagine? Pesach is about to begin at sunset, and after Mincha, which is in the afternoon between Mincha and sunset, the Rebbe would stand at his office, and people would come. It's like just almost Pesach, and he would hand out matzah. And when somebody would come, the Rebbe sometimes would search around in the box of matzah like he's looking for a particular piece. And he would give pieces to some people, and some people were lucky they got a whole matzah. And I'm just going to tell you, there's a delicious story. You can look it up in yourself on the internet by Rabbi Kunin about a delicious story that you can look up. But anyway, okay. So this is, I'll just tell you a couple of little things that would happen. One time there were two shluchim, two Chabad emissaries who came to the Rebbe for matzah. They were both sharing a ride because they were both going. One of them was giving. They were both leaving when they would leave Crown Heights. One of them was going to go to Bridgeport, and the other one was going to go further on to New Haven. And so when they came for their matzahs, one of them got matzahs, and then the other one said, Rebbe said, "What are you here for?" And he said, "I'm going to be making a seder for. I'm from Russia. I'm going to be making a seder for Russian Jews in New Haven." And the Rebbe said, "Eh?" and he repeated it. He said it in Russian, and the Rebbe looked at the other guy. He didn't know that these two people came together. He looked at this other guy. He said, "Is he going with you?" And the other guy said, "Yeah, he's coming with me." And the Rebbe said, "Do you understand what he's saying?" And the other person didn't say anything. Anyway, after a while, the Rebbe just gave him the matzahs. And the Rebbe said, when he said he's going to do something, he's making a seder for Jews in New Haven, the Rebbe said, "You mean you're making a seder for Jews in Bridgeport? For Russian Jews in Bridgeport?" And he said, "No, I'm going further. I'm going to New Haven and to make a seder." And that's when the Rebbe said he didn't understand what he was talking about. And what happened? This guy was supposed to get picked. The one rabbi was supposed to drop off the other one. The one who was going to New Haven was supposed to get dropped off, and somebody was supposed to be waiting there, waiting to whisk him to New Haven. There was nobody waiting for him there. They waited and waited. There was nobody there. It was dangerous, And so he said, "Come with me. At least you'll have a seder. You'll help me. I'm having 10 Russian families. I don't speak Russian. You'll help." And so what happened? Just as the Rebbe said, he ended up conducting a seder for Russian Jews in Bridgeport, not in New Haven. There was another guy came and he said, "I want a matzah for me and I want a matzah for my relative the relative lived in another state." And every year he would mail a matzah to the relative. The relative wouldn't get it in time for the seders because the Rebbe gave it out a couple of hours before the seder, but the guy would put it in the mail and the guy would get it on Chol Hamoed. And so on the intermediary days of the holiday. So the guy came for his matzah and he said, "Now I want a matzah for my relative." And the Rebbe said, "Surely you will deliver this personally to him in time for the seder." And the guy's saying, he didn't know what to say. He didn't say anything. He didn't understand. I can't do that. He doesn't live here. He's not in Crown Heights. So what happened? He ran to the post office, but it was too late. The post office was closed. And he saw somebody in there and he banged down the door. He said, "It's an emergency. I have to mail this now." And the guy inside said, "I'm not letting you in. Even if I let you in, there's nobody here to handle your mail. It's not going to get handled until tomorrow morning. Nobody's going to look at it." So the guy didn't know what to do. He didn't leave it there. And he just, he went back home. And shortly before Pesach began, there's a bang on his door. It's the relative who's supposed to be in another state. And he said, "Oh, we had health problems. We had to come here. Do you have my matzah?" He handed him the matzah personally, just like Rebbe said. Then there was another, and I'll just do one more story. The Rebbe would give, there's a famous doctor, Abba Seligson, Avram Abba Seligson, who was a doctor in Crown Heights. The Rebbe would give him a whole matzah and pieces of matzah. And the Rebbe would say, "Grind this up and give it as medicine during the year to certain people." And Rabbi Seligson said it was amazing. It was a total wonder drug. There was a guy, Rabbi Aaron Greenberg, and he told this story personally to a Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson in Kfar Chabad. He told this story personally. So he said, how did he meet him? The Chabad Shliach was doing outreach at an airport. Was it at an airport? Yeah, at an airport. And this guy came up to him and he said, "I have a story for you. I have a Chabad story about your Rebbe." He said, "When I was a kid," the guy said that when he was a kid, he had a tumor. And back then, they didn't know how to do a lot of the things that they do now. And it was bad news bears to have, he had a tumor in his head. It was bad news bears. And so he was very frightened. They were religious Jews, but they weren't Chabadniks. And some of their friends wrote for them to the Lubavitcher Rebbe for a blessing. The Rebbe gave a blessing that he should have the surgery. This kid should have the surgery. The night before the surgery, it didn't matter that he had a blessing from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was scared to death, this little kid. What did he do? This kid unhooked himself from all the machines, got up and snuck out of the hospital and went home. The doctors, when they discovered what he did, were furious and didn't want to allow him to have surgery again. They were furious. And some people intervened, and they convinced the doctors. But the kid was still petrified, absolutely petrified. And his brother, who lived in Montreal, I believe, his brother pulled strings with the Lubavitchers that he knew, and he said, maybe he has a blessing from the Rebbe, but he needs to see the Rebbe. He needs to hear something from the Rebbe. And so this guy said, "You can't, there's no audience now. It's like right before Pesach. You can't do that." But I know, I know when the Rebbe comes out of the building, and you can catch him when he comes out of the building. And that's what they did hours before Pesach started. They were standing there waiting for the Rebbe, and the Rebbe, when the Rebbe was giving out matzahs, and the Rebbe was giving out the people would just pass by him, and he would go like this, like this, like this, like this. And then this kid arrived with his brother. The Rebbe didn't know, well, their Rebbe had never seen them. They didn't say what their names were. And the Rebbe stopped the line, and he started searching. He said, "I need a whole matzah. I need a whole matzah," to his secretaries. His secretaries looked for a whole matzah. He gave it to the kid, and he said, "This is going to be the 6th time I've cried on Pesach. I don't know what it is. I'm a basket case. I cry all the time now." And the Rebbe said, "Just as this matzah is whole and complete, so are you too going to have a complete refuah shlema. Put it on the the matzah plate, and put it as the middle matzah, the Levi, and just as this is the food of healing, and just as this matzah is complete, so too you're going to have a complete recovery." The kid was so calm after that. He went to the hospital. He lay down on the bed. He was like so totally confident. And the doctor said his operation was a medical miracle. He had a complete recovery. They never saw anything like it in their lives. Years later, he's not such a little kid anymore. He comes to the Rebbe for dollars, and he wanted to thank the Rebbe and to tell him, "You saved my life a while ago." But, like so many people, when they would come and they would actually see the Rebbe, they were dumbstruck. They couldn't say a word. The Rebbe looked at him, said he was in the dollars line. And the Rebbe didn't just give him one, he gave him $1 and then he gave him 4 more. And he said, this is so that you shouldn't need any more miracles like you needed last time. Years later, never saw this kid in his life. And anyway, he knew who it was. So anyway, I want to say that at the end of Pesach, there's a very, very, very important thing. It's called like Shalosh Shudas or whatever it is on the last day of, it'll be Shalosh Shudas on this Shabbos. There's a hundreds of years old custom now to make a Mashiach Suda, a meal for Mashiach. And the Rebbe said, just as, Pesach is all about being freed. And just as we celebrate the first Redeemer, what Moses did, what Moshe did in the beginning, so too the final Redeemer is Mashiach. And we have a meal for him at the very end of the 8 days of Pesach. And it's a very, very, very holy custom. You have matzahs. You can have 3 matzahs. You don't have to eat all 3, but you have you just have to have matzahs. You don't have to have 3. And you drink 4 little cups of wine or 4 little cups of grape juice, and you ask Hashem to bring Mashiach. And it's very, very, very holy. I wouldn't miss it. So anyway, anybody have any questions before I'm gonna stop the recording, and